everybody, this is Matthew Movies coming in with my review of Halloween, the 2018 sequel that I really, really liked quite a bit. I mean, I don't think this is a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but overall, I really, really dug this movie. And here's the thing. I, like a lot of people, a lot of horror fans, I adore the original Halloween, and I'm a big fan of the series as a whole. I think it gets really, really goofy in parts, like most horror franchises do. And there's lots of parts of it that don't work, but overall, I mean, like the Michael Myers, the theme, the mythos, a lot of it really, really works for me. And like Laurie, I love that character. And personally, I am not a big fan of the Rob Zombie movies. I don't feel like they get what the appeal of those movies are. Like they're too grimy and gross, and like there's parts of them that I don't mind so much, but overall they're not my Halloween by any stretch of the imagination, and I just don't care for them at all. So I'm really excited to see a good classic Halloween movie come out again, and I just really, really like this movie a lot. Like I said, there are a few elements that I wasn't a big fan of. Like, I don't personally, even though I know that they didn't set that up until the sequel, I don't love the idea that Laurie and Michael aren't siblings anymore, because I always thought that was kind of an added interesting element to the mythos. And at the same time, like, I get what they were going for, where it makes him more of a wide threat to everybody, that he's not just obsessed with his own family. And don't get me wrong, obviously when he was obsessed with his own family in the original movies, he still was taking everybody out left, right, and center. But I don't know, I get what they were going for, but that relationship, that specific importance always really, really worked for me. And I still thought that they did a good job of setting up why he would still be after Laurie after all these years, even though she isn't a sibling. But I don't know. Personally, I would have preferred if they didn't erase that element, but whatever. Overall, I really, really dig this movie. Like, the guy who plays Michael Myers in this movie, I think is by far the most physically intimidating of any of them. Like, I love the shape in the original Halloween, which is what originally the character was called. I really, really dig him. Like, I love, like, and the fact that he's like a little bit more human, work, like not human, but like he's not so grandiose in size or abilities, other than like basically he's impervious. I mean, he's powerful, but he's not like this. That all works for me, but there's something about like this like massive man being Michael's, and like just destroying everybody. Like, oh, it just really, really worked for me. Like, the guy, there's something so intimidating about this version of him. And I loved the way they introduced him in this movie, where like the whole thing with the mask at him and stuff like that. Like, I mean, right off the hop, and the fact that like he was still in the asylum, and all the people around him like were reacting so much. It was so clear that like he runs the roost in that place, even though he has just remained in the asylum for all those years. Unlike in the original like series, he's, after he was arrested at the end of Halloween, he's just stuck there. But he within that world, he's got so much authority, and the whole idea of it, like the podcasters showing up and showing him the mask, basically wakes him up. I really, really dug that. And the podcasters overall, I didn't love that conceit. I mean, I think it makes sense. Like, there's so many true crime and podcasts these days, so it was fairly topical. I get what they were going for, but I don't know, their interplay, like between the two characters, just really didn't work for me. But at the same time, I can't complain too much, because it had that kick-ass scene where with the mask, which makes like the idea that he would have the mask makes a fair amount of sense. The idea that he was able to get his hands on that somehow, but whatever. And then the way that the two of them get taken out, the two podcasters get taken out, is, oh man, it's so brutal. Like, there's not very many horror movies where like one of the first people getting killed, you were really like, oh man, I really want to see them get out. But like the female podcaster, like when she was like so afraid and trying to get away from him, and he drops the teeth, like I really wanted her to be safe. I wanted her to survive, and I did not get my wish, but I wanted it. And that, to me, shows like how effective this movie is at getting you to care about these characters. But I mean, obviously the end all be all of this movie is the whole Laurie versus Michael dynamic, and I just loved like the battle, the way they set up their whole thing, and like the battle sequences between the two of them are so great, and all that's like so great. And Laurie in this movie, I mean, I've always enjoyed Jamie Lee Curtis as an actor, but man, is she just killed it in this movie. Like, she's comes across like such a badass, and like at the same time, like completely being able to be seen as other people as like this loose cannon, and like the two sides of the character, like when she the peril comes, how incredibly effective as she is, and like how like you just look at her and you're like, you do not want to mess with her whatsoever, but at the same time where she's like basically a social pariah because she's been like so affected by this thing that happened to her. I thought all of that was so effective, and like when she's going around following Michael and trying to get at him all throughout the town, and like when you see her house, like all that's I loved that stuff. Some of the supporting characters I thought were a little bit weak, like the family overall was okay. The dad was a little bit, but like some of the friends of Laurie Strode's granddaughter I thought were completely useless. I could not stand the new Doctor in this movie. I thought he was like such a piss poor version of Loomis, and like the whole everything that happens with his character I couldn't stand. It's by far my biggest problem with this movie is that character. There's nothing that he does that I enjoy, other than maybe at the very beginning where he lets the podcasters in. Like otherwise, I his whole and like his whole thing just does not work for me. Like where the what you find out he ends up being like just not at all. Did not care for that whatsoever. But I mean, I loved the babysitter and the little boy that she's watching. I love the two of them. I mean, that little boy was so hilarious, and like their interplay and just all like you could really there was such an affection that came across between the two of them, even though he's so much younger. Like it's not it didn't come across like she's babysitting him just for the money. I mean, obviously it's for the money, but like if the money wasn't there, they wouldn't be hanging out or whatever. But like you could really the affection between the two of them and like the way that they interacted, that just felt so real for me. So when Michael shows up in the house and like the concern, like it just so great, like just totally worked to perfection for me. And Laurie's daughter, played by Judy Greer, who's an actor I've always really enjoyed. Like I really liked the way they wrote her character, where like she's completely writing her mom off as essentially like just completely out of control. And then once Michael comes into play, like when you finally see that, like sure she has not embraced her mother's way of life whatsoever, but when the S hits the fan, like where she like what her mother put her through was so like pitch perfect. Like she's set up for this moment and she pulls it off, and like you don't expect it. I thought that was great. And the granddaughter I actually really liked quite a bit too. I wasn't so sure how much I would like her at the beginning because she felt like so on the nose Laurie Strode, like especially like they had her like looking out the window instead of seeing Michael, seeing Laurie, and they were really playing it up to the nines. And that's another thing with this movie that I didn't particularly love, where they really went for it as far as like callbacks to the original movie, and some of the time that was good, some of the time I didn't love it. Like I love having the original music back, but I didn't love some of those callbacks. I thought some of them were a little heavy-handed, but really at the end of the day, this movie comes down to like the Laurie and Michael dynamic in that house, and I loved all of, like the traps that she has, and the way like where she's trying to go and clear the rooms to try to find them, like how she comes across like she's been trained by like the best trainers in the world that would make her an effective person, like in the army or whatever. Like she could be like a Navy SEAL or whatever. Like she knows everything to do, and she's so like by the book and so like and so I keep saying effective, but that's what she like. Her character is so good at what she does, and then like the way the whole movie comes to an end just worked completely for me. Like across the board, with the very few exceptions, I dug this movie. The father, I'll say this, Laurie Strode's son-in-law, I enjoyed his character. He was some good comedic fodder, and not in the movie enough for me, but so be life. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie a lot. Let me know in the comment section below what you liked about it, if you didn't like it, how you feel about the original franchise, like all your thoughts about this series and this film. Other than that, have yourself a good day.